to continue our discussion of the Guy movie. We started off with Cool Hand Luke, and we're going to move on to another 60s classic tonight, Bullitt, starring Steve, the turtleneck adds 6 inches, McQueen. So, Spidey, this is your first time seeing Bullitt. What were some of your impressions?
Indeed. Definitely a late 60s movie. You can tell with the starting to experiment with different camera angles. The shot of Steve going in and out of focus through the car wash was especially memorable. You know, the music and definitely a 60s feel to it, but a great film, truthfully. Never seen it before. Everyone's familiar with the iconic car chase, of course, but I had never seen the movie, and it was very efficient. It didn't promise to be any, Shakespearean leap, but entertaining, very tight, good use of camera angles and tension, and everyone in it did very well, especially Steve.
What kind of makes Bullitt a Guy movie as opposed to, say, TV shows that my wife likes, like Bones, for instance, or even Law and Order? There you have the two detectives, usually a male and a female, and I use the term detective loosely. Mm-hmm. But they're always working together. Mm-hmm. They often end up becoming romantic interests through their work.
Well,
But they collaborate. They share thoughts and ideas and often emotions. In Bullitt, there is a girl, but she's really just there to stare into Steve McQueen's eyes and ask if anybody's home. The answer, of course, is no, there's not.
No.
But there's one scene late in the film where he's returning back to his girlfriend, and they've already established that she drives a rather girly little yellow Porsche 356. And the establishing shot is not of Steve walking up to the apartment, flowers in hand, to make an apology for not being available to her. I think her name's Karen or something. That's not important. The establishing shot is of the car. That's how you know he's going back to the girlfriend.
Truthfully, in this movie, if she was only referred to in passing, or if she was just on the other end of a phone, it would have been just as effective. Literally, she's in this movie because someone in the studio read the script, said, okay, I like it, we can get Steve McQueen to do it, and then somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, you gotta put a girl in it. Oh yeah, we gotta have to have a girl in it. Her, let's pick her. Will she sign in? Great, okay. Other than that, there's really no purpose whatsoever that she serves, other than to establish that Steve is not a monk, that his wife is not dead, which is the only other option for a cop in San Francisco at this time frame, I think, and that he indeed is normal. So,
kind of the lone wolf. He relies on the guys underneath him. He puts up with the people above him, mainly because they say you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
But he very much is the one guy out there who he can rely on, and the fact that he does so with minimal charisma sort of would make it hard for a female, I think, to really engage with this movie.
But it's a Guy movie in a sense that, let's see, gunshots, explosions, car chases, the iconic car chase, the one that most people will point to this movie at least at number 1 or 2 in greatest car chases of all time, and there's very good reason behind that. In great scenery, and again, a little bit of eye candy for the men, but other than that, it's not a deep movie about feelings. It approaches that level on a little bit, and and he has a conversation with his girlfriend about that and how police work affects him. But that's as deep as it gets as far as the emotional register. It's not a deep movie. It's essentially just a police chase, a little bit of a mystery going on, and it's very straightforward. It does, but again, it doesn't talk down to anybody. It's just a Guy movie from the sense that it's bare bones. There's not a lot of frills. It's not trying to be deep. It promises you it's going to be this, and it delivers on this, and you finish your popcorn and you move on.
And that Bullitt is very much an up-to-the-minute movie for its time. And this is another thing we were talking about, is that if your grandkid asked you, Grandpa, what was it like in the 60s, you could just hand him this DVD and he'd know exactly what it was like in the 60s, because there's a big emphasis on technology, big emphasis on machinery. In fact, in no fewer than 3 different scenes, the hum of a piece of equipment, like a jetliner or what we decided I think was an early fax machine, is used to build tension. And again, that speaks to the guy. But it's a movie that focuses a lot on things like cars, and with the clothes and the music and the titles, it's very retro modern looking to our eyes. But also very interesting in the glimpse that it gives into the time period in which it's set and which it was filmed.
It tried to be very modern and succeeded for its time frame. It was a very hip movie. You know, the old expression that Steve McQueen is the essence of cool. You get a lot of that in the movie, and it makes you feel, you know, guys can be cool. Whereas in this day and age, it's much more fashionable to play down the guy, or especially the man, as a moron. He's a bumbling, he's a buffoon, he is Homer Simpson, he has to rely on...
Only occasionally justified.
Yes, maybe 75, 80% of the time tops. But other than that, I mean, it's easy to make fun of the guy and kick the guy. This is completely the opposite. You can tell that this was when men were still cool, for want of a better term, was when this movie was made, and they definitely played up to that. You know, Steve is the sex symbol of the movie at a whopping 5 foot 2 inches tall. And
he's short, by the way.
Yes, in case we mentioned that, he is vertically challenged.
He was the Tom Cruise of his day.
What else made it a guy movie to you? We talked about technology, we talked about cars, we talked about having the smallest possible amount of emotion to keep it realistic. And this is more of a cop genre thing, but we had the superior that is, you know...
See how often he lets me answer questions?
I just wanted to give him full context. It did have some of the cop cliches, and you know, the guy from City Hall, quote unquote, although he wasn't really from City Hall, Robert Vaughn, is on his case, the politician, of course, who can't be trusted. And that was all done very well, and keep in mind that movies from this time frame were setting up what we would consider cliches today, but they weren't really cliches at that time.
On the one hand, it relies a lot more on exposition than Cool Hand Luke did.
Right.
That was minimalistic in all aspects, but this one is minimalistic in terms of the amount of effort that's expended. You know, getting the point across.
There's no overacting in this movie.
There's no overacting. There's barely any acting at all, really. But it's funny to see the sets. I mean, it's like they decided, we're going to set this movie in San Francisco. We're going to let San Francisco basically be all of our eye candy,
right,
to steal the term you used earlier. Because it's funny when they walk into sets like there's several scenes that are set in a hospital. It essentially looks like they walked into a big garage and started setting up half walls and partitions and said, you know what, this is an operating room, this is the morgue over here, and just started shooting. And it's interesting to see that juxtaposed against the extreme amount of detail that they go into with medical lingo and the coroner giving his detailed report of standing over a corpse and examining it. And it's interesting to see the different ways in which they use the city, the freeway outside the hotel room. But you're right. There's a lot of cliches that have kind of entered the vernacular now. You know, examining the crime scene and the chase through the airport and things like that. But
the car chase in general.
The car chase in general. But it's interesting to think back to the time that it was filmed and realize that this was all very fresh and new, and in some cases really even edgy back in its time.
Yeah, and keep in mind again, in 1968, this is pre-French Connection. This is pre-Dirty Harry. Even though a great film that's set in the same city, and one that I believe we'll be getting into in the coming episodes, so to speak. You mentioned the terminology they used. One of my favorite parts of the movie, and they didn't overdo it, but they, instead of having characters just talk to talk, there are a number of shots where Steve is in the background, or you see medical personnel doing their thing, or you see even Steve and his counterpart or his partner in the movie examining some evidence, and they're doing it in a very methodical way. It seems very authentic, just from the way they're doing it, because again, they're not using it as an excuse for exposition or to talk about how their girlfriend left them last night or develop more drama. Essentially, they're cops being cops, they're doctors being doctors. And I really liked that. It was something that I noticed a few different times. Again, they didn't overdo it. It wasn't, blood squirting everywhere, but there's a scene in the operating room where it's very specific. You have the surgical assistant handing instruments to the doctor, and she's literally putting them away as she's handing them back, and it's being done very matter of fact, and you could tell it was authentic. They had great technical advisors on the movie. They must have.
Except when it comes to how many hubcaps are on a Dodge Charger.
I think that every Dodge Charger has at least 7 or 8 hubcaps.
But we didn't delve into the car chase a whole lot, and obviously it's the thing that most people remember about the movie. It will be in any top 10 or top 5 list of car chases in movies. If I'm going to be honest, that one of the main reasons I kind of pushed for this movie to be included in our lineup, so to speak, was because I knew we needed a solid car chase in any discussion of guy movies. And here you have not only the 2 cars, the Mustang and the Charger, or the Maverick and the Chevy, as Spidey called them, jokingly, right?
Of course.
Of course, yes. But then, you have the iconic location, the hills, and then sort of the open chase afterwards. It's obviously inspired many movies. Perhaps most recently, the movie Drive is what it reminds me of, and that's even a Ford versus a Chrysler product as well. But you might think that's the climax of the movie, and in many functional ways it kind of is, because the climax actually takes place on foot, which is kind of a bold choice when you think.
And the good thing about this one, and the car chase does go on for a little while, but it doesn't. It's not crazy. They're not crashing into a mall. One of my favorite movies. They're not. Cars aren't flipping over backwards. You don't have hundreds of them piling up. You don't have.
It's a complete bore, essentially.
you don't have crazy things going on. You just have very fast cars driving very fast on the extremely dangerous and car unfriendly streets of San Francisco when it comes to high-speed chases. Not a place where you can have the Le Mans unless your car has springs that are made from some out-of-this-world material. But
these are made from bed springs,
yes,
essentially.
I think they are, and I think that after every shot they were replaced, and they must have had 15 Chargers and 25 Mustangs to get that sequence all down. But
fun fact: the whereabouts of the Mustang driven by Steve are unknown. The chase does lead to one of my favorite acting moments in the movie. Maybe one of the only acting moments in the movie is when the driver of the Charger thinks that he's gotten rid of McQueen in the cloud of dust on the highway, and up to this point he's been the essence of cool, really, considering the circumstances. And then he looks in his rearview mirror, sees a cloud of dust, and you see this very, very subtle smile.
Yeah. It's not really. It's more of an exaggerated smirk.
Yeah,
I think is what it was.
He's thrilled. It's the kind of thing that Mr. Spock would have to squint to notice. But.
Yes, but it's a guy movie. If you've never seen it, I would certainly recommend it. Yes, it's not going to be one of the ladies' favorite movies because essentially it doesn't have anything to do with them or emotion or anyone from Britain. There's no one named Darcy in the film, at least not that I recall. And there is no crying from anyone. Spoiler
on
alert.
The inside.
Yes,
a lot on the inside.
There's a lot of crying on the inside. A lot of laughing on the inside also.
Yeah.
I felt.
Yeah, sometimes
it touched me emotionally.
Yeah.
Right about here.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
I did, very much.
And thank you for joining us. Next time we'll get into the 1970s. As Spidey previewed, we'll be looking at Dirty Harry and Death Wish.